Hey guys, this is Rich from Pacific, and I'm back at you with another episode of our Sampire 101 video tutorial series. In this series, I've been showing you how to make your Sampire character in Ultima Online, how to train and equip with basic starting gear, and also some of the things you can do with this character. So, in this episode, we're going to be talking about one of the main reasons why you probably want to make a Sampire in the first place, or one of the main things you want to be doing with your Sampire, which is completing champion spawns. I'm going to talk about what champion spawns are and some of the basics of how they work, plus where they can be found and their locations. And I'm also going to talk about a few techniques that you can use as a Sampire to complete these encounters. Okay, so first let's go over what champion spawns actually are. Champion spawns in Ultima Online have been around for a while, and what they are essentially is areas of the map where there will be a champion spawn altar, and it's like a purple stone thing with a turtle looking idol in the middle. And in and around those altars will be monsters of various types. So depending on the spawn that is running, you'll have it'll start off with lesser monsters, and it'll slowly progress to tougher and tougher monsters until at the end there will be a boss or a champion spawn boss. So the way it works is that the more of these monsters you kill, the more candles will start to appear and turn on these altars, and when the candles finally are fully around the altar, that's when the boss appears. So when you defeat the champion spawn boss at the end, there are various rewards that can be obtained depending on what facet you are participating in. So if you're in the Felucca rule set facet, um, then when you defeat the boss, you will receive 6 scrolls of power, and sometimes more. And I'll go over how you can get more than 6. But these scrolls of power will be, 110, 115, or up to 120 skills. So this is often why most people do these spawns, is to get these scrolls. It's really the only good way to get 120 scrolls in the game, and it actually has made champion spawns stay pretty relevant, even though it's been in play for a decade or more. Um, some of the other rewards you can get, of course, is that each time one of these spawns drop, doesn't matter what facets in, you will 250,000 gold pieces will drop on the ground. That can just be picked up. I highly recommend bringing a bag of sending if you plan on doing this, so that you can pick up all the gold. Also, you have a chance of getting one of the champion spawn artifacts, which they're comprised of. There's some deco items, some pretty interesting deco, as well as some replica items of other artifacts. So it's overall worthwhile to do these and to get good at these. Okay, so if you're gonna start spawning with your character, with any character, but specifically your Sampire, I highly recommend going to uoguide.com and looking at their champion spawns page. So this gives a lot of good information, and a lot of the same information I'm going to go over in this video. But if you want to do your own research and you just really want a way to look something up, this will give you a good background about what champion spawns are, some of the history. As it mentions, they were released early on the Third Dawn expansion, but they really didn't come into what we know them as today until about Publish 16, where they were trying to revitalize the Felucca landscape. So, in summary, um, what champion spawns are today are really a way to keep the non-consensual PvP system thriving in Ultima Online. Um, to give you an idea, really the only way to get the vast majority of 120 skill scrolls in the game is to do champion spawns that are um, in a Felucca rule set facet, which means that it is a risky endeavor. You can be attacked by other players. Red characters can come up and kill you and take your scroll. And for any of you who have been playing this game for any period of time, you know that this is still a very thriving aspect of the game. Um, so a lot of times this champion spawns are pretty much the only aspect of the game that a lot of players will do. So it's good to know everywhere that champion spawns are active. So this will talk about the types. I'll go into each of these details of each of these types, but it does mention the original types: Abyss, Arachnid, Cold Blood, Force Lord, Unholy, and Vermin. So those are kind of like the core champion spawn types. But then we do have some Trammel rule set spawns, such as in Tokenol Islands, there's a Sleeping Dragon spawn. There's the Minotaur spawn in the Labyrinth. That is also a Trammel rule spawn, Trammel facet rule set. Corrupt spawn, which is at the bottom of Bedlam, and the Glade spawn, which is inside the Twisted Weld area in Ilshenar. Uh, some kind of ones less traveled. There are two spawns inside the Stygian Abyss. So even though Stygian Abyss is a Trammel rule set area, there are two champion spawns that are actually the Felucca rule set. So you can get power scrolls from either of these locations. So I'll show you all of these. And then Dragon Turtle is the new Time of Legend in Aeodon, and that actually has both a Trammel and a Felucca rule set instance. So you can do it in either. I'll show you both of those locations. Basically, this goes also over kind of the logistics of how the spawn works. As I mentioned before, you have to kill monsters and to get the candles to go around the altar. So to give you an idea, this is what the altars look like. You'll see these purple stone areas. When they're not active, they look like this, and they'll have an idol in the middle, which you will have to use the justice, not yes, the no, not justice, the valor virtue in order to activate. You'll need to be a knight of valor, which I'll go over how we can get that. So once the spawn is active, monsters will start to appear around it in the immediate vicinity, and the more you kill, the more these candles go. So first, the white candles will go interior, so they'll go to 4, and then for every 4 candles, then a new red candle will appear. So this little chart shows you that in order, level 1 is all, for the red candles 1 through 5 or 6, mostly 6, you have to kill 256 of that lesser spawn. So, to give you an example, in the Cold Blood spawn, level 1 is, snakes and lizard men. So they're pretty easy to get, but what you'll see is, especially if you're not a Sampire character, it may be difficult to actually kill 256 monsters to move the spawn forward, because you only have a 10-minute period to essentially kill that many monsters. So with techniques I'll show you with the Sampire, this can be done pretty easily. If you have the right gear and the right tactics, it's easy to do. Now the level 2 is, of course, less monsters, about half as many, but they are tougher. So to give you an idea, on the Cold Blood spawn for level 2, I believe that they are lava lizards and basic ophidians. So, they're still pretty easy to dispatch for a character like a Sampire, but you have to kill 128 of them in 10 minutes. Level 3 gets a little more difficult. Usually this is where your spellcasters will kick in. Some of these have spellcasters all for every level, like the Abyss spawn, for example. Level 1 is Imps. Well, Imps do cast spells, and they will kill you. So some of them only have spellcasters at, say, level 3. Anyway, you get to kill 64, and then, of course, the last level is the toughest ones. To give you an idea, level 4 on the Cold Blood spawn, level 4 is Dragons, and I believe Ophidian Justicars, or whatever the highest level Ophidians are. So they can be pretty challenging, and you have to kill 32 of them in 10 minutes in order to summon the champion. So once the champion is summoned, they'll appear on this altar, and the lesser spawns will stop spawning, and you can clean them up so that they're not around anymore, but no new ones will spawn once the champion is active. Then once you defeat the champion, if you're lucky, um, and you can defeat him, you get 250,000 gold pieces, just drops on the ground, falls from the sky. And so you can pick that up. I highly recommend bringing a bag of sending, as I said. And if you're in the Felucca rule set, um, you also get 6 power scrolls. So these power scrolls are really the draw for these encounters. So most people are here for these scrolls. These scrolls will be anything from 110 to 120 in total points. It is possible to also get 105s just by killing the mobs in any spawn, even the trammel spawn. So that's something. If you're looking for just 105, you don't have to necessarily go to one of the Felucca rule sets. You can go to um, any of the champion spawns and possibly get a 105 to drop in your pack as you kill the spawn. There's also a chance to get the Scrolls of Transcendence, so this is actually a really great money maker. You can farm these spawns even without killing the boss, and then kill enough of the mobs, and you will get scrolls, pink scrolls or Scrolls of Transcendence, which are basically instantly giving you points in the skill. So these are really great benefits. There's also a chance to get one of the artifacts once you kill the boss. And I won't go into all of them, but it gives you the percentages here. You get 10% to get a replica, 15% to get some sort of deco item, and then there are some unique items that you can get for only certain spawns. Like so, the corrupt spawn, for example, there is a chance to get the gristled mare. So that's kind of a unique instance. Anyway, these are good. I would highly recommend that you keep these websites, bookmarked, and it does give you the location of all of the instances of where these altars are. In this video, I'm going to actually show you each of these locations, or at least show you where they are on the map and how to get to them, and talk about, what your tactics may be to complete the spawns. Okay, so before we get started talking about the various champ spawn locations, there's a few things I want to go over with you guys about, what you might want to consider carrying or using equipment-wise with your new Sampire. So these are just some basic things that I recommend that you should at least start with. The first thing I'm going to address are weapons. So when you're doing a champion spawn, especially with a warrior character, and especially with a Sampire, you really want to make sure that you match your weapon types or your weapon slayer damage with the type of spawn you're doing. So if I'm doing the undead spawn, obviously I want some sort of undead slayer. If you're lucky and you have a cameo talisman or any sort of slayer talisman, that will also be tremendously helpful. So you'll need a wide array of slayer weapons to do most of these spawns. My recommendation is to just kind of do one at a time. Pick a type. So you pick undead, for example, and you just make sure that you have all of the undead weapons that you're going to want that will be able to handle all 3 or 4 stages of the actual spawn, including the boss. So for me, that's usually at least 2 weapons. So I'll usually have a weapon that I'll use for like the first couple levels of the spawn that's faster, and then maybe has some sort of hit area effect on it. And then as the spawn progresses and they get a little harder, but there's fewer of them, then I'll maybe switch to a weapon that has, it's a little bit heavier hitter, but also has the same Slayer property. And then when I get to the boss, I may use a different weapon entirely, depending on the various strengths and weaknesses of that boss. So in the case of Undead, All of the spawn in Undead actually are susceptible to the Undead Slayer property, but the boss himself is not vulnerable to Undead. So I would probably switch to something that uses AI instead of Double Strike here. That's just one example. You will need a pretty wide variety of weapons. You don't need to have these all at once. Like I said, I recommend doing them just one at a time. Take one type of spawn at a time and really get the equipment and your technique down for that spawn. Practice it a couple times. And over time, as you do more and more, you'll start to build this arsenal. I'm not really going to go into how to create these weapons. I have previous videos where I talked about imbuing and how to get these 100% elemental types, so you can review those. If you have any questions, just put them in the comments and maybe I can help. So that's one thing. The second thing is I want to talk about virtues a little bit. So virtues are important in champion spawning because one of them is absolutely required. So you need Valor, and you need to be a Knight of Valor in order to start or activate a inactive champ spawn. So what happens is you use Knight of Valor, you'll use this on the idol itself, and it will activate the spawn. So depending on the location, it may either be a random type or it'll be a specific type. So we'll talk about that a little bit later. I'll also show you how to get Knight of Valor relatively quickly on the very first spawn location that we're going to see. The other thing that is useful also is sacrifice. So if you haven't been chaining sacrifice, I recommend you do this on a daily basis. What sacrifice does is it allows you to essentially resurrect yourself. So say you die and you're in the middle of the Lost Lands Felucca and there are no healers anywhere, and you're miles away from a town. If you have been training in sacrifice, you can use sacrifice to self-res. Can be very invaluable. The thing is you can only train this once a day, and how you train it is you will sacrifice your fame to. So what you do is you use sacrifice on a monster like a demon, and it will see the error of its ways, and it will helpfully raise your sacrifice. So you can see I'm only halfway through. As a new character, I'm only halfway through this um, first phase of sacrifice, and you can check your fame by looking at your loyalty rating and seeing that I only have 1500 fame because I sacrificed the rest away. So once I get to about like 10,000 fame or so, um, I will then go and find a demon and use sacrifice on him, and then I will gain in the sacrifice. Um, so that's super invaluable to have. I recommend you do this kind of like as a daily task so that you at least get to follower or seeker of sacrifice so that you can use it once or twice. And I believe that the level of sacrifice you have all the way up to night will determine how many times you can self-res per week, not per day, but per week. So that's it. There's also a lot of value to using the justice virtue, but we're not really going to talk about this here. But what justice does essentially allows one player to protect, quote unquote, another player inside a champion spawn area. And this is how you are able to get more than 6 power scrolls when a boss drops. Um, Maybe a little bit more advanced for this video, and I may cover it in another video on how to get Knight of Sacrifice and how to run an effective protection. Pocket protector is what we call it. So it's another character that has Knight of Justice that just sits in the spawn area and will collect the additional 6 scrolls. The way you gain justice is by killing red characters or player killers, and there are a couple ways to do this. What most people do is they just have a second account or somebody else that has a red character, and they just kill them over and over until they get Knight of Justice. So those are the virtues. Another note, so we talked about sacrifice and self-resing in the middle of Fel. The other thing that can be super helpful is to carry Vampiric Embrace Scrolls. I recommend this for basically any adventure because you will die, and you don't want to have to carry reagents in order to cast Vampiric Embrace again. So having a few Vampiric Scrolls and Vampiric Embrace Scrolls helps. The one thing is you can't insure these. So what I also do is I'll also carry some piece of arcane clothing that you can insure, and this will give you essentially, it allows you to cast spells without reagents, so it just uses up a charge. So these are very useful items to have. Um, and the last bit that you're going to want as we talk about spawn locations is kind of ahead of time, it's useful to have all of the known spawn, lost land entry points and, you know, um, spawn location entrances, such as there's certain dungeons, fell dungeons, as well as the labyrinth and some of these other locations. I put them all in one book just so it's easy enough. I kind of call this my spawn book, and so just as we go through these locations, you might want to send a mage there, mark a couple runes, and put them in some rune books so that you have them on your Sampire, because being able to get from location to location quickly may make the difference, especially if somebody says, hey, a particular spawn is running at a particular location, you want to be able to get there quickly. So as we go through this, I'm going to be referencing my rune book, and I highly recommend, and I'll show you where to mark the runes for the various entrances. Okay, so the first location we're going to talk about is actually not a spawn that you'll probably end up doing to completion a lot. But the reason why I chose it first is because it's got a couple other very useful attributes. One, it is always active, so you don't have to activate it. Um, so it's very useful for if you don't have Knight of Valor and you need it to activate a different spawn location, you can come to this spot, kill a few of the mobs until you get Knight of Valor and then move on. So this spawn is called the Sleeping Dragon. Um, it is located on the Isamojima Island in Tokono, and it's slightly southwest of the Fandancer Dojo or northwest of the Shrine of Isamu. And you can see it's located on the map with the skull pan is the Sleeping Dragon, or the boss is Soretto. Um, let's see if if we're going to do this spawn, it has 4 levels. It's like all the rest of them. It starts off with Deathwatch beetles and lizardmen, so they're very easy to kill. The second level is actually, it gets a little more difficult because the kappas can be quite challenging. Um, and then it moves on to very difficult when we're talking about Harus, Revenant Lions, and Onis. So generally speaking, as a Sampire, you're going to find it very difficult to progress much past level 3 if you're solo. Just because these are you may be a good warrior, but these are tough monsters to kill. Um, it does recommend that you use Reptile, and of course Revenant Lions are undead, and Oni are demons, and Harus themselves are dragon or reptile. Serato, the boss, is can be very challenging, and he has a very nasty poison. So it says he is actually vulnerable to snake or reptile slayer. So I don't know if that's true or not, but he has a very nasty area poison. Um, so if you plan on actually doing the spawn, I usually recommend, if you're going to do it all the way to completion, I recommend doing it, as a guild activity. Sorry, it is in the Trammel rule set, so um, it's not really worth doing this. The no power scrolls will drop. Um, but the reason why I like to come here, like I said, is to either top off my Knight of Valor, um, and I'm also going to show this. This might be a good place for you guys to start, because I want to show some of the techniques that we're going to use as a Sampire in any spawn. So I've gone over this in several videos, but I'm just going to touch on it here. One thing you're going to want to do is you want to make sure that in your settings, under options, you have um, the always attack option on. And I've gone over this a little bit in the training videos. It's in pretty much every other video I talk about because this is really important. What it does is basically make sure that your character is always attacking whatever you have selected. So we're going to couple that with, if you go to the input tab, you're going to see that at the very top there's the option for setting what the scroll wheel up and down do. So if you set this to target last enemy and target next enemy, so up would be last and down would be next. And then of course I have my standard target nearest enemy, which would be tab, and I have my target next enemy, which would be tilde. So these are things that I set on, all my warriors. So I use that in conjunction with, some sort of key like, I have tab for my target next, and then I have Q for whirlwind, right? So I have my whirlwind, my primary and secondary abilities just on single button clicks. So what you're going to do is go into combat mode. So pretty much in any spawn, you're going to run into it and you'll find the mobs. And what you'll do is you'll use your scroll wheel on the mouse to just scroll through the targets. And you see how it's changing targets? With always attack on, what that's doing is essentially it's like double clicking on them while you're in war mode. So it's essentially aggroing them. So you're going to use this technique to gather up large groups of mobs. And occasionally you'll have to hit tab or whatever your target nearest enemy is just to kind of like reset it so it's close to you. And we'll get these large groups of mobs. And you're going to make sure you are using some sort of whirlwind. And then you find out where you want to fight. Like say we'll fight here. And you hit next, whirlwind, whirlwind. You can see that I'm just basically just hitting target nearest or tab and then whirlwind, tab and whirlwind. So the reason why I'm showing you this is basically, this is what success would look like for a Sampire, is this big, massive group of bodies surrounding you. And since we went over that you're going to have to kill hundreds of these mobs, lesser mobs, to progress to the next level, it's really, to do it in an amount of time, you want to try to get as many grouped up as you can. Now you can see, just that I've already turned 2 white candles. And so eventually, when I get to, when there's 4, it'll go to 3 red candles. See, I'm turning the spawn. Okay. So I'm gonna kind of head out of here. Now you can see I have up to 4 now. If I kill a little bit more, then I'd have 3 candles, and eventually this just keeps going until it gets down to 6 candles, in which it'll change to the next level. The reason why I'm using this as the first spawn to talk about is that this is a really good place to kind of practice this technique. These monsters don't cast spells. They're not really all that hard hit. The first level is very easy to handle. It's just lizard men. If you're still kind of low on your skills like I am, you may gain a little bit from being here. It's also a great place to come if you just want to farm pink scrolls, scrolls of transcendence. So you can just do this for a little while, maybe till you get a pink, and then come back. So you can see what I'm doing is just I'm hitting tab, whirlwind, and the technique is really just to, whirlwind as much as you can, right? So you're going to get the timing down here. Very similar to our training activities. Now you can see how it's being applied in the activity we want. So this is a fairly easy one to do. And, you in some spawns, especially ones where there's spellcasters, even imps, you want to be very careful on how many you quote-unquote grab at a time. but you use the same technique. Um, so hitting a lot of monsters at once will keep you alive more because your whirlwind is really giving you a lot of bonus damage. So that's Sleeping Dragon. Um, like I said, we're not going to really go too much more detail. This is a tram spawn, so it's not really worth um, doing to completion a lot, but it is a fun guild activity. Okay, so the next location we're going to talk about will be probably your first Fel Feluca rule set spawn that you'll be able to do, especially with the level of skills that I have right now. I'm, just barely GM, over GM in swords, and not even GM in tactics. So this is a really great spawn to not only do to get the power scrolls, but also to, it's one of the easiest ones in all of them, and that is the Piper or the Vermin Horde spawn. Um, the There are a couple ways to get here, but probably where you want to do is in your rune book, you want to create a rune for the fire dungeon. And the fire dungeon is inside the actual city limits of Serpent's Hold. So you can mark a rune essentially right here, right by the docks, and you can see there's a little entrance right here. The Verminhard champion spawn, it's the first levels are very easy. They're just rats and slimes. Um, and then the second level is dire wolves and rat men. Third level is hellhounds and ratman mages. And so this is where the spellcasters kick in, where it gets a little more challenging on the third level. And then level 4 is Ratman Archers and Silver Serpents. Barracoon himself he starts out as a human. Actually, he's called the Piper, so they've renamed him. Um, he starts out as a human, but what will happen is that after you hit him a few times, he will turn into rat form. So once he's in rat form, he will be susceptible to both a Repond and Vermin Slayer while he's in rat form. So this is one of the easiest spawns to do solo, and probably the only one you'll be able to kind of start off with this basic gear. What you will need for this spawn is you will need a spell channeling weapon of some sort that has whirlwind, and that is because the first level consists of slimes, which are very easy. They won't really hurt you, but what they will do is deteriorate your weapon very quickly. So spell channeling for some reason mitigates that. So you no longer, if you're wielding a spell channeling weapon, the slime's acid does not affect its durability. So you want a spell channeling Radiant Sim, and then you'll want some sort of repond axe to fight the boss. You could use a double bladed or a bladed staff if you wanted instead for AI, but I prefer the double axe for double strike. Another great thing to have for the spawn is a Vermin Slayer talisman, which you can find. They're not too rare, not too hard to find. You can either buy one from another player, or if you farm enough of um, um, some of the bosses will drop them. I don't mean the champion bosses, I mean the peerless bosses. So wherever you can get talisman, there's a chance that you can get a Vermin Slayer. So these are pretty valuable and useful to have for this spawn in particular. So to get to the fixed location for Vermin Horde, you're going to go, like I said, the best way is through the fire dungeon, and you mark your rune here, and you run in, and you take this path down into the fire dungeon, and you'll see a door. So you go through the door, and then there'll be 2 sparkles, and you take the south sparkle. So once you take the south sparkle, you will be into the spawn area. So right now it's not active. This is pretty much the most popular location to do champion spawns. So on your shard, you will probably see this active very often. It's also one of the ones that's most highly looked at by red characters. So if you're doing this solo, you just want to be smart about it. Um, you know, maybe have a lookout, maybe don't do it solo, maybe do it with a buddy. Um, but it's the likelihood of encountering some sort of PvP um, around or at the end of this spawn is fairly high, especially if you're on a populated server, shard. That being said, you can also do this spawn very quickly. So, um, 20-minute total time from start to end is not unheard of if you're practiced and you have all the right gear. So this is the fixed location. This, just so you know, that this is actually in the bottom of the third level of Despise. So you can also get in here through running down through a spot, Despise, and following this area. But getting here through the fire dungeon is the quickest way. If you need to get out of here quickly, um, the best way is to find these sparkles up here, and you can see one of them goes to Terrathan Keep, the other one goes to the Ancient Worm's Lair. So you can use those locations to get out of this area quickly. Okay, so the next location we're going to go over is another fixed spawn in the Felucca rule set, or in Felucca, and that is the Unholy Terror spawn. Its fixed location is in Deceit. It's kind of at the bottom or close to the bottom. So what you can do is just mark yourself a rune. It's on Ice Island, which is north and slightly west of Moonglow. So if you don't have a rune here, you'll just have to take a boat and mark one. The dungeons itself is kind of in this little area, and it should be marked on your map. So what I like to do is just in my book, I'll mark Dungeon Deceit Fell and make sure that I have it right in front of the entrance here. So to actually get to the location, you're going to want to go into the dungeon, and you take this following path. So you go towards the back here, open this door, go down this south hall, and you can run past all these guys, you don't have to fight them. So once you get down to this next level, what you do is you go north here, go through these doors. So this area is great for your open door macro. So just hit spacebar, open the door. So you go through these, and then you go down to the south, and then down in this area. So what you might remember if you used to play back in the day, this is the Bone Knight room or whatever. There's Bone Knights that spawn here, but you can see these teleporter areas right here. So on the map, you'll see that this is the down location for level 2. So we're going to go ahead and go down, and it'll teleport you into the spawn area. So you can see this is the Unholy Terror. It's a fixed one, so this location will always have undead, and it's really this whole region all the way back to this temple, all the way up through. So undead will spawn in all of these areas. The actual altar is kind of down here. And so this is where the boss would spawn and where you started off. So to do Unholy Terror or the Undead Spawn in general, either at this location or any of the random ones, you're going to obviously need some sort of Undead Slayer weapons. That will be the best. So I carry a Radiant Scimitar for the first couple levels. I include some sort of hit fire area, which really it's 100% fire damage with hit fire area, so it really will mess up those early on mobs. Then when it gets into the later levels, I switch to an axe, and then probably for the boss, I'll either keep the axe, because we'll talk about him in just a second. I'll either keep the axe, or I might switch back and forth between some sort of AI weapon like this bladed staff. So let me go ahead. So Unholy Terror starts off with ghouls, shades, specters, and wraiths. These are all spell casting, so the first level is pretty straightforward. A lot of times their spells won't hurt you too bad, but death by 1,000 paper cuts essentially is possible. You can get a whole lot of low-level spells will still take you out. So you might want to just take it slow on this spawn. And then it moves on to Bone Magi, Mummies, and Skeletal Mages. It gets a little more challenging, more spells. Then Bone Knights, and of course Liches. Lich Lords and Rotting Corpses are really where I would switch to probably the Axe. If not level 3 or level 4 is where I switch to the Axe. Neira himself is a Necromancer. He's a human. He does not have a Slayer vulnerability. And what he does is he actually will summon, it's very similar to Dark Father, he'll summon undead around him. So that's why a lot of times I'll keep the axe while I'm fighting him. You'll find yourself surrounded by more undead, and I'll just use the whirlwind to, refresh my mana. Now, Neira is pretty hard to hit. One of the things I recommend using is some sort of hit lower defense or hit lightning with him. He is susceptible to things like being discorded by a bard. So those are all very useful techniques when you're fighting him. So another note on this spawn is that this is actually one of my favorite ones to do, because what you'll do is you'll get the large groups of mobs. First couple levels are pretty easy, and they can be very satisfying because you can wipe out entire rooms. One of the benefits of this area, though, is that there are passages and corners and turns. So what you can do is maybe aggro the monsters, especially when you get to like liches and more, and lich lords. You kind of aggro them and then run up here and kind of stay out of their line of sight, so they're maybe not casting on you. And then you can kill them as they come around the corner. So it's very similar. Also, one aspect I want you to keep in mind with this is that there is this back room. It's a little deceiving. This back room will fill up with monsters, so you really want to be careful when you come back here. And also in this room, you'll get monsters that spawn in these areas where you can't hit them. A lot of times you can just ignore them or maybe lead whatever out you can, but don't really go in here unless you want to die. It's very common to go in there and just get cast on a lot and almost insta-killed. So when you're dealing with this back area, you just kind of maybe poke down, grab some of them, and then come up and hide behind this wall and like fight them as they come around the corner. So don't be afraid to, this is another spawn that you'll be using. You want to time your evasions accordingly. So, give yourself time for your evasion counter to cool down, get up, aggro them, and then right when you hear them charge up, cast evasion, and then run in and attack. And hopefully it'll give you a few seconds to avoid their initial volley of spells. The other thing is that, like I said, you do have to go all the way around, and there is also mobs in the back room, so it's very similar back here. This hallway is usually pretty easy, but this back room will fill up with mobs. So when you have 50 or 60 spellcasters, you don't want them all casting on you. So what you might want to do is just take this room slowly, get a few, bring them back, fight them around this corner until you can really get a feel for how many you can take on at once. All right, that's Unholy Terror at Deceit. Okay, so the next fixed fell spawn location we're going to talk about is the Cold Blood spawn, or Ricky as it's called, and this is located inside the first level of the dungeon of Destard. Destard is just south of the Britmood Gate in this mountain range, and it should be marked on your map here, and you can see there's a big entrance right here. So to get to this spawn, it's actually very quick. You want to mark your rune. So again, we've got Dungeon Destard Fell. So we mark it, just here anywhere in the front of the dungeon. And to get to the spawn, what you want to do is just basically run in, and you want to try to avoid getting the dragons to aggro. And you just run around the south side of the wall like this, and you want to run to this back room. So you want to run try to just follow it up, and hopefully they don't target you or follow you in here. If they do, then you might have to deal with them. There's a lot of dragons in Destard, so you want to watch out. So the main spawn area is right here. It's a very small room. And you can see it's Cold Blood, or Rikktor is the name of the boss. This is a great one. It's fast. It's usually pretty easy to do up until the boss itself. Um, so there's all one big room, and it's very easy to group up the mobs into one big area. A couple things about this area is that it does have an Ankh back here for res, so if you do die, you can just run back here and res. So one of the techniques I like to use is to try to keep this north western area clear of monsters. So every now and then come back here and make sure nothing's spawning up here. Just in case you do die, you don't want to be instantly killed again by some monster that's just sitting here waiting for you. So, alright, the actual Cold Blood champion spawn itself consists of very, very easy first couple levels. So lizardmen and snakes, lava lizards, Ophidian warriors, and enforcers for the first couple levels. So none of these are spellcasters. You can make quick work of them, group them up in large groups, and just wipe them out. Level 3 consists of drakes and zealots. So it's really the zealots you want to watch out for because they are spellcasters. They will e-bolt or fireball you. So you want to just kind of take them, 3 or 4 at a time. Just learn to figure out what your limit is. Make sure that you time your, this is another good one to time your evasion with. So it's super important. Level 4 dragons and avengers. Really the dragons can be kind of challenging. But if you have the right gear, you should be able to make quick work of them. And then of course the champion Rikktor, or Ricky. Now Rikktor is a one son of a bitch. He is not really hard to hit, but he does do a lot of melee damage. So if you're going toe to toe with him, especially in a solo scenario, good luck. It is doable with the right gear and the right tactics. So one thing I want to point out about him, of course, he's weakest to cold. So you want to have a Dragon Slayer weapon that is 100% cold. That's going to be your best bet. He is pretty slow, so a lot of times what people do is they'll just they'll kind of lead him or kite him, as it's called, and they run back and forth and maybe joust him. So that's, it does take a while. It's better than getting chomped. So he will do a lot of damage with his chomps. And then he also has this other annoying ability. Basically, he casts an earthquake. So it's pretty important to play with your sound on when you're doing Rikktor, because you'll hear him start to charge up his earthquake. You'll hear a stomping. And then after, 3 or 4 of these stomps, then there'll be a loud kind of earthquake attack. And that earthquake attack will do 60 to 80 points of damage. It can very easily insta-kill you if you're not at full health. So you want to watch out for that. So whenever you hear him charging up, it's usually best to kind of back off and then run back in. If you're more advanced and you're maybe working with a bard, to discord him, you may be able to just stay toe-to-toe with him. But, other than that, good luck. He also will teleport occasionally to you. So it's good to just lead him around in that area. So what you can do is once Ricky spawns, you just want to make sure that, you honor him first, and then try to clear out the rest of the mobs in this area. And then what I like to do is just kind of lead him back and forth along this northern wall. So there's kind of a clear run all the way up and down. So you can, lead him up, fight, then kind of run away, and then just lead him back down in this area. So the more beat up he gets, the slower he becomes. So it becomes easier to kite him around when he's, at half health or more. So with weapons, of course, I mainly just use a Reptile Slayer for everything up until the boss, and then for the boss, I will switch to a Bladed Staff Dragon Slayer that's 100% cold damage. This one has hit lower defense. It makes it a little easier just to make sure that my that I'm hitting as much as I can, and that's pretty it. Now, one thing I will say is that the spawn is also well traveled. It's pretty rare that you're not going to see on a highly populated shard. It's pretty rare that you're going to be able to spend a lot of time in this area without running into somebody else. So just keep that in mind. One more thing to note in this is that there is this kind of area right when you come in um, that does do gaseous poison damage, you can see. So one tactic you can use is to actually try to lead the monsters in there, and the poison will kill them as well. Okay, so the next spawn we're gonna tackle is also accessible in the fire dungeon. So just like our entrance to a quick entrance to the lower level of Despise, we can use the same rune. So we're gonna have our fire dungeon rune, and it is in Serpent's Hold in Felucca. So the spawn is the Abyss spawn. Um, so to get to the Abyss spawn, we're actually going to run into the fire dungeon, and instead of running down and going through that sparkle, we're going to take a different route. So we're going to run down here, and you'll see there's this kind of path, and we're actually going to go all the way down to this bridge, and we're going to, so I can kind of show you, we came in here, and we're going to run all the way down here. We don't want to take this Lost Lands entrance. You're going to cross this bridge, and what we're trying to do is go back here into these back tunnels. So we're across this bridge and follow it all the way around, and you'll go into this little graveyard area where there will be some liches, maybe a few lich lords. Um, there's also some fire steeds in this area, so you want to just kind of run through. But once you get into the spawn area, it will, the actual altar is right in the middle in this kind of recessed area. So you can see it's right here. This is the fixed location for the Abyss spawn. And let me. So the Abyss champion spawn starts off. So this is another all spell casting one where it'll start off with imps and greater mongbats. So fairly straightforward, easy to handle. Then it'll move to gargoyles and harpies. Harpies are not demon slayer, but fairly easy to dispatch. Then it'll go into fire gargoyles and stone gargoyles. It's a lot more difficult. Fire gargoyles will hit you pretty hard. And then into daemons and succubi. So this last level can be very challenging. And then of course the boss is called Semidar. Now Semidar is actually a succubus, and she is unique in that she will do much greater damage. If you look at the notes, basically she really hurts male characters. So she has this some sort of effect where the damage she does on male characters is greatly increased. You can also see her weakest resist is cold. So like many demons, cold is a good elemental type. So if you're a male character, it's saying you can either polymorph into a female or you can use Wraith form. We've actually mitigated this risk by just being a female character. So that's one of the reasons why we choose female elf when we first created this character, so that we could do this spawn without worrying about that extra damage. So the tactic you're going to want to use is very similar to any other of the affixed locations where it's inside this dungeon is you can use the walls and kind of run from area to area. Now when the boss actually spawns, when you're fighting, so I mean it's fairly straightforward. You just kill them, and it is kind of a short run to the exit, so you don't have to worry about so much. This is one of the easier spawns to get to, and it's actually one of the faster ones once you've learned how to do it. Um, Now, one technique you want to do when you're fighting the boss is you want to lead her up. Generally, what most people do is they lead her to the staircase, and they'll fight her right here. And the reason why is because if for some reason you're gonna die, you just run down the stairs, and it will take you into the next level of the fire dungeon, and she will not follow. So you can kind of run down here, catch your breath, and then, recharge, whatever, heal up, and then go back up and continue fighting her. Um, for weapons, we're obviously going to be using Demon Slayer pretty much strictly, so I'll either use uh, uh, Cold Area on a Radiant Scimitar for the imps and some of the lesser gargoyles, and then I'll switch to this is actually the wrong axe. I think I mentioned this before, but I normally would have 100% cold axe that is a Demon Slayer, but I don't have it on this particular character yet, so it's one that I'll have to make to do this spawn. So normally for this I would want, Demon Slayer, swing speed increase, um, and then, 100% cold, and ideally either hit lower defense or hit lightning. If I can get 5 properties. If not, then just stamina leech, mana leech, swing speed, damage increase, and Demon Slayer will work. Alternatively, you can use a Demon Slayer bladed staff, which is just as good. This one is um, great for her, so AI does really well on her. So that's kind of how I would probably roll it for equipment. So that's the fixed spawn for Abyss. It's in the fire dungeon. So one more trick on Semidar here on this Abyss fixed spawn. Um, One thing that if you are playing with a group, and especially if you've got like a pocket protector or a bard protector, which is a common character to roll, bards can actually, if you're fighting Semidar right here at the stairs, bards can stay over here on the opposite side of this wall, and as long as you clear out the spawn from this area, they can safely discord from across this mountain range, and it won't target them. So if you've got a bard character that's going to discord Semidar for you, fight them right here in front of the stairs, and then have your bard stand over here, and you can discord over here, and her area effect will not hit male characters. It doesn't count as aggroing her if you're using discord. So that's just a little trick that I learned. Alright, so the next fixed fell spawn that we're going to talk about is the Arachnid spawn. Now, it's called the Arachnid spawn. Now, again, its fixed location is actually in the Terrathan Keep. So the best way to get there, the quickest way, is to first go into the Piper spawn area. So like we showed before, we go in through the fire dungeon, we run down through, and then when you get here, you can run up here and there's 2 sparkles. Now the south one, it says to Terrathan Keep. So you want to make sure you go to that one, not the Ancient Worms lair, because it's a pain to get out of that other one. So if you go right into the sparkle, you'll find yourself right in the spawn area for Terrathan Keep. Now of course you can run in through Terrathan Keep and through the Lost Lands and go all the way through here and get there, but it's way quicker to use the fire dungeon to the lower level of Despise, and then find that sparkle and then run through that sparkle to the Terrathan Keep spawn. So you can see it's the Arachnid spawn. The boss is Mephitis, and it's a large giant spider. Kind of give you an idea, the actual altar is up here, and then there's this kind of pit area that's all around. Now monsters will spawn all throughout this area. Um, so it can be kind of challenging to get them grouped up if you plan on doing this spawn in this location. You have to occasionally run down here, clear out this area, etc. And we'll talk about that Black Moon Gate here in a second. So that's pretty much it with this. Now there are some kind of aspects where um, they will spawn all around in these corners. So you do need to make sure you run around this whole vicinity just to clear out the spawn. There is also a kind of on a locked door that you can't get through. If you do die, you can go in here, res, get etc., and then you work that lever and it'll open the door to get you back out. So it's kind of a safe spot to regroup. Now the thing with Mephitis or Mephistis, the spider, you're going to need a few sets of equipment to do the spawn. Obviously, Arachnid is all of. So let's talk about the monsters first. So the Arachnid champion spawn starts off with scorpions and giant spiders, fairly easy to get. All of these are poisonous, but since we're a Sampire, all of these poisons will just bounce right off of us. So the first couple levels are very straightforward and easy to do. There's no spell casting, there's nothing going on. So our Radiant Scimitar Arachnid should make quick work of them. You can use some sort of area effect to just kind of wipe them out quickly. This is one of my favorite spawns to do for the first couple levels, and then it becomes one of my least favorite ones on the last one. So this third level is probably the hardest of all of them, any of the champion spawns, aside from maybe Sleeping Dragon third level. Because Dread Spiders and Terrathan Matriarchs are very deadly spellcasters. They will cast things like E-Bolt and Curse and all sorts of nasty stuff on you. So you really want to be careful when you're handling these. You only want to take a couple at once. Make sure that you're using maybe an Arachnid axe, something that's a heavy hitter and that's able to dispatch them fairly quickly, because you don't want them alive for too long during each encounter. You'll also want to make sure that you are using your evasion as much as possible. The fourth level is really not so bad. The poison elementals aren't too bad. And the Avengers, the same thing. They do have a nasty poison, but generally it'll bounce off us. If not, it's easily curable. Now the boss itself, Mephitis, is a very large spider. Looks like this. And the spider it's like similar to Knavery in that it has a web ability. It is susceptible to, of course, Arachnid and Spider Slayer. And basically, if you look at the notes, so its weakest is cold and fire or energy are kind of equal, so any of those elemental types will work. Excuse me. Obviously, it's 100% immune to a poison, and it has a pretty decent physical resistance. So the big tactic it will use is it will constantly ensnare you with its web. And the problem with this is that you can't swing your axe, and it will be able to just sit there and attack you, and you can't do anything about it. So as a Sampire, this is very deadly because if you're not swinging and hitting, then you're not healing, and therefore you're dying. So there is one way to deal with this. So similar to Knavery, we can utilize stone footwear of some sort. So I have stone thigh boots. The stone boots or stone footwear is obtainable through fishing. You can fish in lava, and using lava hooks, and you can fish up stone boots. So what we're going to actually do is, so you can see actually before I get into that, I have a Arachnid Slayer Radiant Scimitar that has hit fire area. It does, this probably should be better. It does mostly physical, so this should probably be either fire or energy or something. I'd recommend energy. It's usually one that not a lot are susceptible to. So since energy works on these, you might as well use your energy elementals on Arachnid. Um, my Mephitis Waltz is 100% fire with hit lightning and swing speed increase, and of course the leeches. I also use a Spider Slayer because Spider Slayer is actually even though it's a lesser Slayer, it'll do triple damage essentially to the spider. So this would probably be my preferred weapon. It does have a mixture of damage types. I think I used Valorite to craft this. Um, so again, we're talking about the stone boots. What you're going to want to do is create a macro. And the macro is fairly simple. What you want to do is first have it equip your item. You want to have it equip the stone boots. Then what you want to do is you want to add a delay for 3 seconds. And then you have another macro to equip whatever footwear you were wearing before. So the end result is that I have a single button click here, F1 is mine, where if you look, it equips it and then unequips it. Now what the stone boots do is they actually break that webbing. So once you see this message that says you managed to equip the stone boots and you can find once it makes it so that you cannot move from the stone boots, putting your other boots back on makes it so you can move. So it's much quicker than waiting for the webbing to dissipate. So this will be your main tactic when you're fighting Mephitis, is that you'll wield your axe, and then as soon as you hear the sound or see that you're webbed, you quickly equip your stone boots and then re-equip, and then you'll be attacking again. So you can see that was only 3 seconds as opposed to the 8 or 10 seconds you have to wait for the webbing to dissipate. So that is the fixed Arachnid spawn location. Again, it's in Terrathan Keep. Okay, so the next topic we're going to talk about is some of the random spawn locations. So these are mainly in the Lost Lands area. Um, and so what I'm going to do is show you essentially the Lost Lands is a section of it's another facet essentially. And in the Trammel, well, it's part of either the Trammel or the Felucca facet. So it's kind of like a sub-facet. So in the Trammel facet, you can actually recall and mark into the various sections of the Lost Lands. But in Felucca, where the Tramp spawn locations are at, you cannot. So the only way to get there is to use one of the many entrances to the Lost Lands. Now, I'm not going to go and visit every location, but what I'll show you is some of the ones that I use mainly, and I think you can get several of them. You can get these locations marked in your book. You probably shouldn't need to use too many others. Now, there are many ways to get to and from the Lost Lands, but this is what I found to be the most effective. So the first one I'm going to show you is the Moonglow to Papua route. So again, in my book, I mark it as the Second Age or the Lost Lands, Moonglow to Papua. So that is in northern Moonglow. You can mark a rune at just around the entrance of this Encyclopedia Magica. So if you look on the map, it's at the top here of the Moonglow island. It's way here at the northern tip. You can mark any in this area. And for this particular location, what you want to do is say you run past here and then you stand on this in this area and you say the word Reksu, R-E-C-S-U. So what I do is on my bank macro, essentially I say bank guards, Reksu, Rekdu. So Rekdu is the return word. So that way I can just quickly get here and go back and forth. So you see if I go into that altar and I say Reksu, Then I look at my map, and now I am in the Lost Lands in the town of Papua. Now, before I go on to any other of my rune locations, I just point out I want to talk about the spawn locations here um, in the Lost Lands. So you can see there's lots of spawn locations, and the majority of them are what are known as random spawns. So say you from Papua, it's a quick run up to this just north. There's a desert one, and what these are their champion champion spawn altars that when you activate them, they can be one of the main types. So they'll either be Arachnid or Cold Blood or Vermin Horde or Unholy Terror or the Abyss. So they can be one of those. It is random. And so each of these are random locations. So up here at the top of this, you've got the Oasis, and the Oasis is a spawn area, but again, it is random. The very north of top up here, I'll show you how to get up here. There's Ice West, and of course there's Ice East. These are good ones. And then we have Terra Sanctum, which is in a little island that you actually have to sail over to get to. It also has a lot of ledges, so it's not a very popular spawn to do, especially since you don't know what kind of spawn you'll be dealing with when you get there. So a lot of times when you're dealing with Lost Land spawns, you want to come prepared because it is a little bit of a pain in the butt to get in and out of this area. You cannot recall out of the Lost Lands. You have to use one of the exits. So that's the Papua to Moonglow location. So using the Papua to Moonglow rune, there's 3 spawns that I'm going to mainly do that are quickly accessible from that entrance. The main one would be here, the Desert Champ. So from the Papua Bank, which is right here at the north end of town, you want to basically just run straight up through this little gate, and you'll see a bridge. You watch out for the ledges here. And essentially this right here is the desert spawn location. So it's a very quick, very close to a bank. You can see the altars right here. Whoops. So this is desert. This is one I like to come to a lot. It is a little bit of a pain because the mobs will spawn like all in this area. They'll spawn somewhat down here in the thing. They'll spawn up to the north. They'll spawn in these little crevices, and then you actually have to run around the other side of this mountain range to get to some of the mobs that will spawn on this other side. So they'll spawn in this little alcove and they'll spawn up here. So you basically just need to run back and forth between these 2 sections. One good thing about this location is that it is, like I said, close to a bank, so and a healer. So if something happens and you die, it's a quick run just down to Papua and the healing tent that's the healer that's in town there. So also from this Moonglow to Papua entrance, there's a fairly quick run to the Hopper's Bog Champ location. So again, this is another random location. So what you can do is you can just run basically south to the edge of town here, and you run down where all the way to the edge, and then you keep running down until you see essentially there will be a bridge. And so once you cross this bridge, you'll run into kind of the swampy area. There'll be another bridge actually. I know, just a little entrance. So it's a little bit confusing at first, you know, the layout, and especially with the terrain, it can make things difficult. There are some other non-spawn creatures that spawn in the area, like bog things, and they can make your life a little bit challenging. But if you look, there is a champion spawn altar right here. So again, this is not a great place because of all the ledges, but it can be a good one to come where it's not really visited a lot. So, and depending on the spawn you're doing, a lot of times they're easy to kind of group into these large areas. It's also not too far from the bank, so it's an okay place to do thing. It is a random spawn, so again, all of these random spawns you have to come prepared. Um, Maybe have your entire arsenal with you until you know what it is, or you can keep them in the bank, pop the spawn, go get your gear, and come back. It's really up to you. And of course, the third spawn that you can really benefit this Moonglow to Papua entrance would be if you want to get over here to Terra Sanctum. So the best would be to just find the docks, place a ship, and then sail over. And what you have to do is land in this beach area, and then once you get to that beach area, you can run in there and find the spawn. Now I'm not going to go over there because frankly it takes a little bit of time, but trust me in that there are a lot of ledges in this spawn area, so it can be very challenging, especially if you're a lone Sampire and you're swinging a sword and you need to get into melee range for them. So with this, you want to, if you're going to do the spawn, sometimes it's better to have like a spellcaster or archery buddy with you to just kind of help you get the items, the mobs off of the ledges. Other than that, it's a pretty decent place. One thing I will say is that you don't really want to die in this location because um, although there is a way to teleport out, so if you go to, I think it's right here where you can see there's kind of a road. I think if you just go there when you're dead, it will teleport you back to the mainland, something like that. Um, but, you know, it's worth a shot if you want to check it out. And it's a good area and it's very close to Papua. Okay, so another great Lost Land random spawn location is Ice West. Now I kind of showed it to you on the map before, but a great way to get in and out of there, pretty much the fastest way, is to actually make a rune outside of the Ice Dungeon in the Felucca facet. So Ice Dungeon is just slightly north of Wrong, and what you can do is you can mark a rune right outside the dungeon entrance here. So you can see I have Ice Dungeon, the Second Age or the Lost Lands. So to get to the Ice West location, what you want to do is first go into the Ice Dungeon, and the Ice Dungeon is where, you know, there's Arctic Orgalords and White Worms and those sorts of things. However, there's also an entrance to the Lost Lands here. So what we're going to do is go up here, cross the bridge, and then kind of hang a right, and it'll look like a dead end, but you just walk in there, and it will take you to the Lost Lands Ice West area. So I'll show you that real quickly. So past the bridge, just ignore all these, and you go here and you just kind of walk through, and you'll see now I'm in the Ice West location. Now from here, you still have to run a little bit. It's a quick run along the mountain range. I'm getting a little bit of lag here, so you run all the way down. Now you'll see there's a sparkle here. Now this is a good way to get back to the mainland, but we don't want to take that. And it's actually quicker to run back out the way we came in. than to take this sparkle. But if you need a pinch, in a pinch to get out of this area, you can take this sparkle. You do want to watch out to not accidentally run into it. The main spawn is here in this kind of little valley area. You can see there's a random champion spawn here. And this is a great spot to do spawns because generally all the mobs will spawn in this vicinity. There's not a lot of blockage. So depending on the actual spawn that you're doing, like say it's Vermin, Horde, or Piper, it's super handy to have everything just in one area. You can group them all up and just whirlwind them all. Um, Certain other ones, it's not so easy. So the spellcasting ones, Undead, for example, it will make this more challenging because there's nowhere to hide from their spells. So this is a great spot though. Ice West is a very popular spawn location. Okay, so another rune that you're definitely going to want to have if you're doing a lot of spawning is the Lost Lands Delucia entrance in the Felucca facet. So the quickest way to get to Delucia is actually marked on your map as Passage to Delucia, and it is, I guess that's kind of south and west of the Trinsic Moon Gate and the Painted Caves, just to give you some reference. And you'll see a hole here in the mountain range. So you can mark a rune right outside here. And this actually puts you into kind of another little dungeon area that is, it's actually kind of, it can be a little bit, this is a dungeon area that can be more maze-like. It's a little difficult to navigate through here. So in this dungeon, you'll see things like phoenixes and some other unique monsters. But generally, when you're getting to Delucia, you just pop in here and you want to take this path. So you run down and you take this path down, and it'll put you into this lower area. Then you kind of run over here, and it'll mark on your map to Delucia. And now you can see we're in Delucia. Now from here, it's a quick run north to the City of the Dead. So you can see there's also a passage to Trinsic. We're not really going to go over that because I usually come in through Delucia and find it quicker to go than go through the hassle of getting through the passage to Trinsic. So you get into Delucia, you can run north to the City of Dead. That's another random champ spawn. The one I'm going to show you now, though, is actually it's not marked on your map, but it is how you get to the Ice East location. So what you're going to want to do is run through Delucia, run past the bank, and then you want to exit out the east gate. Let me turn on my map for reference. So when you're running down, it's fairly easy. You'll come to a fork in the road. You want to tang the right side. And you'll see a sparkle that's up here. Now this sparkle actually is a two-way sparkle, so this is a handy one. If you go in here, you'll see now we're at the top of the map, and we're very near the Ice East random champion spawn location. Now this particular one is kind of interesting in that you have to, so monsters will spawn in this area, but they'll also spawn over here, which generally is not as easy to get to. So, well, it is easy actually, but you just use this other sparkle. And then when you get into the sparkle, there'll be some more monsters in this area. and then you can kill them, and then you hit this other sparkle, and it'll put you in this area. So you kind of, if you're doing this location, you need to hit all three of those in order to get all of the monsters, and then you can run back out the sparkle, and it'll put you back at the top here. And to run back out, you run along this kind of north mountain face. Oops, getting a little lag, so and we're back to where we started. So generally when you're doing this spawn, you have to hit all three of those locations a couple times in order to complete it. I do like this location because it's a little off the beaten path. Um, this is the only, well, this is not the only way into this area, but this is the only way on foot in this area. You can sail here, but trust me, nobody sails here. They all come in through this sparkle. So if you're in a group and you want to like defend this, you can really defend this sparkle, and no one's really getting into this area. So to get back out, you simply go back out the sparkle and it puts you back. So that is the Ice East location. Okay, so there is one unique spawn here. Well, there's actually two unique spawns here in the Lost Lands. So the first one I'm going to show you is one that is, it's a very difficult spawn to do, and that is the Lord Oaks. Now this is the only spot where Lord Oaks will actually spawn. It doesn't show up in any of the randoms. So if you want to get the skull from Lord Oaks in order to complete the task to summon Harrower, this is where you'll have to go. Now I'll show you in reference to, we just talked about the Ice East Sparkle. I came out the east path from Delucia and I went down this road. So in order to get to Oaks, the quickest way is just to keep running here. And you'll see this kind of northern bridge. You go ahead and take that. And you'll pop through this little mountain range. And now this is the Lord Oak spawn area. So this is a pretty difficult spawn to do. Generally speaking, there are a couple disadvantages about Lord Oaks. One, so not all of the monsters that spawn are aggressive. So, and most of them are positive karma. So we're talking things like unicorns and fairies and those sorts of things that if you kill them, it will drop your karma. So that's one thing that's going to happen a lot. If you plan on doing this spawn, your karma will drop quite a bit. So what I recommend is that you start, if you plan on doing this spawn all the way to completion, one, you're going to need to do it in a group. Doing it solo is very difficult for a couple reasons. One, a lot of times the monsters will spawn along these ledges, and it makes them, almost impossible for like a Sampire to really complete this on their own. They need some sort of archer or mage that's able to use ranged attacks or EVs to get up there. The other thing is that the spawn area is kind of big. It summons this whole area, and it's all just these ledges and little alcoves that you have to run into to get. And so you'll see that like the monsters will spawn up in these little ledge areas, and you have to find how to get up there. So it's very challenging. Then what will happen is towards the end of the spawn, if you've been doing it, your karma will probably drop so much that you'll get into negative karma territory, at which point all of the positive karma spellcasters such as unicorns and fairies and um, I can't remember what they're called, the the dragons, the magical dragons, they'll aggro you and attack you. So it can be very challenging, but this spawn is required to do if you plan on summoning Harrower. Um, Also, the boss itself is very similar to um, the Trammel version that is in Ilshenar, um, where that in order to defeat the boss, you have to go find the bosses. There's basically two bosses that you have to fight. One, you fight the lesser one, and then as soon as the lesser one is done, you can fight the main one. I don't have any weapons that I would use for this. Generally, you can imbue Fae Slayer, which will help. Um, I know that the Serpentine dragons are dragons, but unicorns and Corinne, um, I think Fae Slayer works against them. I'm not entirely sure. But that is the Lord Oak spawn location, and good luck if you plan on trying to do that one solo. Good luck if you're negative karma, like a necromancer or something that uses necro. You will have a very tough time in this area. Okay, so since we're here in the Lost Lands, I'll go ahead and show you this other location down here known as Tortoise. Now, I don't go here very often just because it's a big pain in the butt to get to, but um, here, if for reference, this is the bridge that we were going to head. We just headed out east from Delucia, and this was the bridge that we would have gone north towards Lord Oaks. But if instead what you do is you take this south bridge, you can follow the road south, and then you'll find a little break in the wall here. Once you find this break, you can take this south road, and then you have to loop around again, and then go up into this area. This is called the Tortoise spawn. Now, it's kind of a nice area because it does have a somewhat circular like room to gather all of the monsters, but you'll also find that they do spawn on the other sides, and that you're spending a lot of time running. Sometimes they're on these ledges, so it can be a challenging location, but it's definitely worth it if it's, especially if you think no one's going to come out on your shard and you don't get a lot of visitors here. So it might be a good place to go if you're looking for a quiet place to do a spawn. So another great rune that you're going to want to have in your Lost Lands entrance book here would be the U prison to the Northern Lighthouse. So the U prison, it's actually, I'm not actually sure how you get here on foot. So you may have to take a boat, or there may be some way to cross using this building. But in general, what you want to do is mark a rune right here at the corner of this kind of south end building. Um, and it'll say on the map to Lighthouse. And what it is, it's actually a stone wall that you double click. So I like to use either, you can hit Control and Shift and see it. So stone wall, and it's a secret door that opens up, and then what you do is you walk on this, and it'll put you in the Lost Lands at the very north of the map. And what this is a quick run to the Oasis champ spawn. So that's another way to get at Oasis. So, and another way to get out of this area if you need to run. So it's a good one to have. Okay, so one of the paths left less traveled is another entrance you might want to have in your room book is the Marble Building. Now the Marble Building is actually on this island known Marble Island, um, and that is south and east of Brit and directly north of Trinsic, and here it is on your map. And if you go in through this door, you can mark a rune outside here, and you can just go into this tunnel, and you can actually run around and pop right out into this kind of western area of the Lost Lands. Now, what's kind of nice about this one is this puts you directly in front of a champ spawn. Let's see here. So you just run straight down. And there it is over there. But in order to get to that little, in order to get to it, I think you have to, oh, did I miss it? Yes, I did. So this is kind of why it's a little challenging, is that you have to run around the perimeter here and then get into the area. And this is where the actual idol is, but the monsters will spawn all in this vicinity. This is called the Marble Champ, and not too far south of it, you can also find the Damwin Thicket champ. So you just run directly south down this road. Let me move this over so I can see. And you'll see another random champ spawn. So this one also spawns in kind of this whole vicinity. And so the Damwin and the Marble are relatively close to the Marble Island entrance. Okay, so another great location to have marked to get in and out of the Lost Lands would be Temple Island. So in my book I have it listed as Temple Island. It is literally on an island called Temple Island. And this island is in the middle of the South Ocean. It is just due west of Serpent's Hold. So the only way you can really get here is to sail here and mark a rune. On this island there is this guard zone island or temple that, you know, there's snakes and other things that spawn here. So what you can do is mark a rune right about here, and then you just walk on to this middle section and it will teleport you to the Lost Lands, and it puts you way down here south of the on the south end of the map, and you can see it kind of marked. There's a little temple here. Now what I do is I use this to get to the champ spawn location of Khaldun, and I'll show you to get there. It's a little bit of a run, but it's probably one of the better ways to get there. There is another way using sparkles and teleporters, but that's more, there's several hops involved there. So this one you can make a rune and then take this path to kind of run all the way to this location. So this is another one where there are some ledges, and it can be a little bit challenging, but not nearly as bad as a lot of the other Lost Land ones. So here's another random champion spawn altar. And so the spawn area is kind of all in this vicinity. So you'll see monsters spawn. There are some that spawn up here in these ledges, and you'll have to kind of run over here, deal with them over here, as well as in the south end here. Sometimes they'll be on these ledges. What's kind of nice is that there is this large kind of field here where they will group up and you can kill them. You'll also need to run kind of north of the mountain and deal with them on this side as well. So it's all in all, it's a good place to at least become familiar with. Maybe try doing a couple spawns here to see, just to get the lay of the land. But it's not too bad. It's a pretty good spot. So one more location you might want to mark for Lost Land entrance, and this is coming at the Khaldun area from the north. And this is a good way to get to the actual PvP arena in the Lost Lands, or to the actual Khaldun dungeon. So if you look north of Minoc, in this high steps area. At the very kind of tip of this mountain range, you'll see a little cave, and it actually says to Lost Lands. So this one's actually pretty quick to run through. You just run in here, and you run around, and then you're actually right here in the PvP arena. And this is handy if you want to get over here to the Khaldun dungeon. Now there actually is or there was for some time, a champ spawn inside the Khaldun dungeon. I'm not actually sure if that's still active or not. I may check that out or show that in a different video. That's very different from the rest of these. It's a different type of monster, and they act a little bit differently. So um, just for reference, that is another entrance to this area, especially if you're over here at the Khaldun champ spawn and you need a quick way to get out. It may be faster to run up through here. So it's kind of a hit or miss whether or not you're on this side of the spawn to go to Temple, or this side to go up to the passage to Minoc. Okay, so within the Stygian Abyss, there's actually a Felucca rule set champion spawn location known as Primeval Lich. So to get there, you're basically on the northeast side or northwest side of the Stygian Abyss near the Silver Sapling. You'll see an entrance that says Primeval Lich's Lair. So you just need to run in here, and it'll tell you, you're about to enter a PvP area, and that is because you're entering a Fel rule set. So yes, I wish to proceed. And when you get in here, the spawn itself is this whole little mini map. It's a long hallway to get here, and I'll just show you real quick. So once you run down this long corridor, you get into, there's a keep, and it looks like the spawn is active right now. So if you actually run up here, I'm not going to go into here too far, but looks like it's on the first level, so vampires and gore fiends. So it's pretty straightforward. But the actual idol is here, and monsters will spawn all in this area. There's actually a res onk up here as well, and one here as well. So if you do die, you can just run over here and get resurrected. It's good. I'm going to run down here and show you the monsters for this. So you notice that there was vampire bats and gore fiends for first level. So the Primeval Lich spawn works just like the rest of them, except there are a few differences on the boss itself. So one thing, it's in that area that we showed you. It starts off with gore fiends and vampire bats. Then it moves to golems and dark wisps. Now with dark wisps, you do need to have a piece of black rock in your backpack in order to hit them when they're in their shielded mode. So you want to make sure you have that handy. Of course, undead gargoyles and wights, and skeletal drakes and dream wraiths. Now these last two stages can be pretty challenging, especially solo. So most of the time Primeval Lich is group activity. It is in a PvP zone, so the Felucca rule set does apply. The boss does drop power scrolls as well as primers, so that's good. One of the other things is that there are different phases of this where there's a small chance that there's decorations that can be picked up. So things like the Executioner's Axe, that's where you get the rack, and the Candle 5, which I'm not even sure what that looks like. I've never seen it. There's another interesting little puzzle that's here that I'm not going to go into, but if you want to look it up on UO Guide, it talks about there's a lever puzzle that you need to go through, and then the um, the rewards can be kind of interesting. You get a cool bone container, or a random piece of the decoration, or a 1.0 transcendent scroll. So it's kind of a little bit different than the rest of them, but other than that, it is a good location for spawning. The boss itself is the Primeval Lich, and it is, of course, undead, vulnerable. The one thing I will say about this particular boss is that it has this massive AoE fire blast that it will do. Um, it will affect like half the screen. So you do want to make sure that you can withstand quite a heavy hit. Sampires usually do pretty good against it. Um, things like archers and mages, not so much, unless you're hitting really hard and healing quite well. Okay, so the other Felucca Rousset um, champion spawn inside the Stygian Abyss is known as the Abyssal Infernal's Lair. So to get there, this is really the best way to kind of run in is through, you can come in through the Tomb of Kings entrance and run down through several of these mini spawns and kind of in this way. If you have access to the house that has a teleporter, this is very close to where we were training this character in um, to, the rat spawn area where the clan ribbons were. So in the cavern of discarded, that's what I was looking for. So to get there, you just basically kind of go through here and you run back to, and you'll see there's an entrance. Um, when you go in, it'll ask you, hey, do you want to go? It's PvP rule set. So you say yes, and it'll put you into another like mapped instance of this Felucca champ spawn. So this spawn does drop power scrolls. It is a freely PvP area, so you just kind of run in through this winding spot. And the altar is right in the middle. So it looks a little bit different, but it acts the same. One thing about this spawn is that again there is a resurrection ankh up in this area. Monsters will spawn in this whole room. There are also sparkles in this room, just like with Primeval Lich, that will allow you to teleport out to various Felucca dungeons. So that's how your red players are getting in and out. Um, so to go over the monsters for this, Abyssal Infernal is, they're mostly, well, they are all demons. So you'll want to use your Demon Slayer weapons here. It does get a little bit chaotic, and as the spawn moves on, the landscape changes quite a bit. This is also another spawn where that'll drop decorations during certain ones where there'll be blood on the ground you could pick up, or black crystals, or fire poison fields that you um, these are actually not, I'm sorry, you can't pick these up. These are just things that get added to the room. So as the spawn goes on, blood appears, and eventually you'll get like weird fields and poisons. They don't do any damage, but it does create obstructions in the room. So you can see we started out pretty empty, but as it moves on, there's a lot more obstructions. Um, so it's telling you that these are various exits and entrances. So reds can get in here from High Thoth. Um, you can exit to the fire dungeon, and etc. Now the boss itself is the Abyssal Infernal. It is a demon. It's really not too difficult, but what will happen with this is it will also spawn. Um, it says summons weak versions of elementals in small groups. So it'll do things like summon a group of fire steeds or phoenixes or other things. So you do want to kind of watch out because they will hit you pretty hard. One of the tactics, and I'll show you where to kind of lead him to stop some of that spawn from happening. He also will call meteors down. And then the big one is that he actually will teleport you to one of his pits. So this can be annoying. Um, and one thing to point out is that he's heavily um, susceptible to poison damage. So this is one where you might want to make a poison demon weapon when you're fighting him. It makes it a lot easier. Other than that, if not, you can go with physical or cold, but poison he's definitely weak to. Um, he doesn't do any poison damage, and he's very weak to it. So one tactic you can do with this particular boss, once you've managed to get him up, is that you want to drag him down into this kind of south area, and you want to try to fight him around here. And the reason why is because when he spawns his minions, and it says 5%, but I found that it's a lot more often than 5%. Um, there's a good chance that the minions will spawn down here in the lava pit, so they will be unreachable to you. So that's a handy thing. What will happen is that he will teleport you to some of these. He'll teleport you into these locations where you can't, you can't get out, and you'll teleport back, but um, it is annoying. Keep in mind that there is a res onk up here, so one of the things I would recommend is to do your best to try to keep this area clean, but you'll see that since there's no real other obstructions or rooms, the monsters will be, all gathered up in one big area. So it may be difficult to keep any one area free of mobs. Okay, so in Ilshenar, I think that's how you say it, there are two random champion spawn locations near the moon gates. So to get here, you simply just need to enter any moon gate and select Ilshenar, and then you can select either Humility, which is the one we're at right now, and you can see that not too far there is a Champ Humility, and the other one is Valor. So I'm gonna just show you the Humility one, and just with Valor, it's very similar. You come out here and you run in the center of this. There's another random spawn. Now, when I say random, they work just like the random spawns in the Lost Lands, in that they could be any of the main um, champion spawn types. So it could be Arachnid, it could be Vermin Horde, it could be Undead, it could be Cold Blood, etc. You can see that there are a few key differences with, so this one is already active. This is the Abyss spawn. Now, there's a couple good reasons to use these spawns. First of all, since they're in Trammel, um, the bosses don't drop power scrolls, so that's immediately one reason why would you come here. What I like to do is kind of use these spawns as training for when I'm going to go do the spawn in Fel. So they're the same monsters, the same pattern, the same bosses, and it's a little easier to get to, and it's a little less risky. No one's going to come along and PK you in this area. Um, so these are really good locations for practicing your various champ spawn techniques for different types. Um, they also do, they will drop scrolls of transcendence when you're killing the mobs. Plus, you could also get 105s, and I believe you do get the 250,000 gold pieces. So they're worthwhile to kind of do just for fun. You won't get power scrolls from them, but they're good for training. Um, like I said, the other one is up at Valor, and what you do is you come out the Valor Moon Gate and you cross the little bridge, and the idol itself is in the middle of this little outcropping. This one's a little bit more dangerous because usually greater dragons spawn in this area. So the other thing that makes these spawns a little bit more challenging and sometimes more fun is since it is in Ilshenar, there's a random chance that any of the mobs that spawn will be Paragon. So this can get little interesting when you're at like the tier 3 or tier 4 level and they start spawning Paragon, Terrathan matriarchs, for example. Life can be pretty interesting. So they're worthwhile to at least explore. So the other Ilshenar spawn worth mentioning is directly out of the Spirituality Moongate. Over here to the east is, or north and a little bit to the east, is the Force Lord champ. So this one's a quick run from the gate, and this is very similar to the Lord Oak spawn. So it's identical monsters, identical pattern. It does not drop any power scrolls. You will not get the skull of the champion when it's done, but other than that, it's the same spawn. So again, why I do this spawn at all? Well, again, if you want to practice or test your weapons against the Lord Oak spawn, this is a good place to do it. The spawn area is this whole vicinity, and as you can see, you know, these fairies are actually mobs in the spawn, and since they're blue, if I kill them, I will lose karma. Okay, so the last two spawn locations that I'm going to show you guys, it's actually one single spawn, and so if you have the new Time of Legends expansion, you can visit the Valley of Aedan. So to get there, you can go to any Moongate, and you can select Tamur and Aedan. Now again, you need to have the Time of Legends expansion in order to get here, and you can select the Valley of Aedan, and that'll put you into this. So for the Trammel version of this spawn, you just get there through a Moongate, and it'll put you down here. And the spawn area is up in here, so we're going to do a quick run. It's relatively safe and quick to just run up directly north and west from the Moongate. And you'll see a little bridge here eventually. And once you cross the bridge, you'll be in the dragon turtle spawn area. So you can see this is active right now. And it may always be active, I think, in Trammel. I'm not entirely sure. Doesn't look like anyone's really progressed the spawn, but this can be a pretty challenging one. And of course, this is the Trammel version, so this particular location doesn't drop any power scrolls. So let me go ahead and show you the monster profile for this spawn. The dragon's turtle spawn is, so again, it's all the new Aedan monsters. So you've got the Myrmidex drones and the Myrmidex larvae, which are the kind of the first level. These are pretty straightforward, not too hard to kill, and pretty easy to group up, especially in that area. It's when you get into the second and third level where it becomes way more challenging. The silverback gorillas will throw these like bananas at you, I guess, that do quite a bit of damage, and wild tigers can also do quite a bit of melee damage. So you do want to be careful on this. Don't take too many at once until you get a real good feel for your character. And then it moves on to greater phoenixes and inferni. Inferni are kind of like they're similar to like lava elementals. They will kind of drop an effect on the ground that will burn you and do quite a bit of damage. And of course, the last level is Dimitrisors and Allosaurus. So these can be very challenging. Allosaurus is, I think they dismount So it can get pretty challenging when you're trying to get enough of these. In fact, this spawn in general, I have done it solo a couple of times, but it is very challenging to actually just turn the candles fast enough, just based on how tough most of these monsters are. Some of them don't hit very hard, they just have a lot of hit points, so you're not one-shotting them. The other thing is, too, is that um, a lot of these really don't have a viable Slayer weapon that will be good for our Sampire. So right now, as far as I know, the only Aeodon Slayers are spell books and um, bows. So there are no double axes or um, radiant scimitars that can be Aeodon Slayer. So it makes it so it's a little tougher to finish than the rest of these. The boss itself is, of course, the dragon turtle. And it's this very large turtle um, monster that comes out. And it has a few unique attacks. Before I get into it, generally I found this whole spawn fire is a good elemental type to have on your weapons. They all have, at least the weakest resistances in fire. Um, he is 100% poison resistant, so and a lot of these are, so don't even bother with poison weapons here. It doesn't talk about it on UL Guide, but it has some unique attacks in that um, he'll kind of throw out these orbs and you'll see them emanate from him. And if one of your character gets hit by the orb, it'll either take a mana reduction or a stam reduction or a hit point reduction. So they can be quite challenging. Um, I would highly recommend doing Dragon Turtle at least a couple times with a large group. Maybe bring some tamers so that you know you get a feel for how this boss operates. Um, so in the Tremel version, he does not drop any power scrolls, but he will occasionally drop a dragon turtle egg, which can be used to actually hatch a dragon turtle hatchling, which is a pretty cool 5-slot tameable pet that you can have. So that's pretty good. If I was gonna have any tactics that I recommend, there are ledges, but most of them you can run over. So it's actually fairly easy to group these all into pretty large groups. So the challenge isn't the monsters themselves or grouping them, it's just making sure you can kill them fast enough to keep the candles moving, especially if you're solo. Also on the north side here, there is or maybe it's not in the tram version. So on the Fel version, there is definitely an Ankh up here for resurrection. So let's go ahead and I'll show you how to find the Felucca rule set version of this spawn, which if you are going to do this, it's the one I recommend doing because then it's worthwhile. At least you're getting power scrolls and primers out of it. Okay, so um, to get to the Felucca rule set version of the Dragon Turtle, you actually will go in through the dungeon Destard, and instead of going back towards the Cold Blood spawn like we showed earlier, you're going to take a quick, slightly different route. So you can get there by, once you head in, you just head it directly west and slightly north. You can run along this wall. And what you're going to do is go into this back room right here. It's not marked on your map. Oh, I guess it is. It's the stairs down. So so this is one thing you kind of have to, yeah, there you go. You might have to take a couple steps into that to get it to register you're going down. So once you go down, you'll be down one level and you'll see another staircase down. So this is going to the 3rd level. And this is actually where there's a wyvern and there's 2 sparkles. But if you notice, there's an entrance right here in the Fel version. So we're going to go ahead and go through it. And now you can see we're in this, looks like a different area, winding path. And now we are in this special Fel rule set version of Aedan. So not all of Aedan, it's not all of Aedan, it's just the spawn area. So you can see if we walk up, run up here, it's, you know, identical map to the Trammel version, but it's this kind of limited area. And here is the Dragon Turtle Felspawn. So again, this is kind of a handy location to know. If you like the spawn, you plan on doing it, you might as well do the Fel version. As I said before, there is a healing Ankh up here, so if you do die, you can kind of try to keep this area clean, and you can come here and res. So it'll save you a long run out as a ghost. Now to leave this area, you can run out the way you came, or there are sparkle locations somewhere in here. So this sparkle location will put you actually back to Destard. So you can see I come out and it'll put me down here at the bottom of the map, and we just kind of run up and run out. All right. Okay, so that more or less concludes this episode of Sampire 101 regarding champion spawns. I know there was a lot of information, but I hope it was valuable to you. Please feel free to leave any comments. Again, as always, if you like this video, please subscribe or click on like. I've gone ahead and marked in the comments quick bookmarks to the various spawn and area spawns, so that if you want to just get an overview quick, you can use those links below. In future videos, I'll probably be going through and doing each main type of spawn with my new solo artist character here, just to show you some of the actual techniques. Obviously I couldn't do that in this video, it's already long enough as it is. So thank you for watching.